This is the Auburn Podcast. Before we get going, Zach and Painter here with you. Want to give two quick shout-outs to our sponsors. Links to both of them in the show notes. But Elite Athletic Gear signed on with us at the start of this week. Use promo code Auburn for 10% off site-wide, or you can also just check out the link in the show notes that has it'll have the code automatically supplied. So, yeah, buy all of your athletic swag, your workout swag, and all that.
You can also check out in the show notes, as Zach mentioned, FANATICS, and we've had a good time with them, and they've been a good sponsor. Of course, they hooked you all up with Final Four gear, and as we turn our attention to football season, maybe you can think about some football gear you might want, or any Auburn athletic gear with FANATICS.
This is the Auburn Podcast, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. Zach Blackerby and Painter Sharpless.
Hey, dude. What's up?
Man, just chilling on a Wednesday. Woke up, thought it was Tuesday. Nope, it's Wednesday.
I think that's better. It seems like it's better.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yesterday's show, hope you guys enjoyed it. Something a little different. Segment from the lunch break. You and Justin talking draft with Russell. That was good stuff. And then chatting with Auburn equestrian coach Greg Williams. That was fun. But yesterday, when I was putting together my sportscast for my morning show, came across an article by Brandon Marcello of Auburn Undercover, or Auburn 247, about he and a handful of other Auburn beat writers went and covered Greg Sankey up in Birmingham earlier this week. And I'm just going to kind of read excerpts from Marcello's article, but talking about the scheduling hiccup between Alabama and Georgia. I mean, the Deep South's oldest rivalry, that's kind of become a talking point in offseason as far as scheduling. It's been played late in the year for so long, and I think it benefits Auburn for sure to play it earlier in the year. And it's just kind of weird to me how Commissioner Sankey and the SEC, they're just kind of keeping it close to the vest, and it's like they don't really want to talk about it, which is interesting. So
yeah, there's got to be a reason for it, right? It's just that we all know. I mean, the Georgia president talked about it. Media outlets have confirmed it. If it's a secret, it's the worst kept secret ever.
Yeah,
because I don't think it is.
Right. Let's see. This is Sankey, according to 247's article. Until we release our schedule, it is a speculative conversation. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but I will address our schedule when we actually release the entire schedule, because whether it's one game, 6 games, one team schedule, it has to be addressed in the broader context of an entire 14-team member conference with 8 conference games and 4 non-conference games. So it's just kind of interesting to me. And based on his comments, Marcelo writes, it's possible the Deep South's oldest rivalry could remain in October through 2024. But that doesn't seem to be the case based on all the rumors and speculation that we have. So
yeah, I think the main issue here for Auburn isn't necessarily that the Georgia game has to be out of November. It's that the coaches don't find it advantageous to have to go to Athens, get a week break, and then go to Tuscaloosa. And it's great on the years that they're both home.
Right.
But I think for Auburn fans, I don't. There was a split among the Auburn fan base about if moving it was the right decision, because there are Auburn fans, it's a traditional school, and you have a hard time usually getting people to break traditions, especially it seems at Auburn. But, I'm okay with it being in November with having that tough slate. I think the away home thing is really what they're gunning for. And based on the other 12 teams in the league, it sounds like there's a lot more at play here, and that's why it makes it so difficult.
Yeah, Malzahn said in November, and Marcelo touches on this in the article, but the thing that Malzahn's more concerned about is he wants one at home and one away every year, which is the way it was before the expansion back in 2012.
12 was the first season, right?
And, that just kind of seems more logical to me, because just being 100% honest, it doesn't matter how talented Auburn is, and even post Nick Saban, it's just going to be very hard for Auburn to compete on the national level when they have to play in Athens and in Tuscaloosa. So it's like, all right, do you build the team to succeed every other year? Do you kind of incorporate that into your strategy? But if you're a head coach in today's games, like
you don't have that luxury.
You can't do that. You don't have that long. So it kind of ties your hand a little bit.
And also it's interesting because you're looking at the way things are now. Like having success is cyclical. And now I think both of these teams are a little bit different in that way, in that it looks like both of those programs aren't going anywhere.
Right.
Nick Saban, even though he's now getting close to 70, does not appear like he's slowing down. And Kirby Smart's in his early 40s. So both of these programs are built for success. They were successful programs before those two head coaches got there. That will be the case after. But they are going through right now a moment of excellence. Is that fair to say? I mean,
sure.
It's certainly unprecedented what Nick Saban's done at Alabama. I just find it interesting that you're catering a schedule around two teams who are really good right now. It won't always be that way.
Yeah, but I mean, they've both been pretty good for a while. I mean, Georgia's been good under Mark Richt.
That's the interesting thing. They got rid of a coach that was winning 10 games a year a lot of years. And It's like a lot of times it's a risk to make a coaching change, especially when your coach has provided that much stability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I get the argument that, well, how much should you change right now just when, it's just kind of bad luck for Auburn. Your two rivals are playing probably the best two programs in college football outside of Clemson, right? So, so how much do you overreact, or you just kind of wait out the storm? But if you're an Auburn fan, you look at it and it's like, well, how long is the storm going to last?
Right, and then again, it's not necessarily, I think, about not playing those teams or not even not playing them in November. It's about having, like you said, one at home and one away, so that every year it's not so, or every other year, I should say, it's just not so brutal.
Right. Well, that was a big chunk of the conversation. I think it was like 2 off seasons ago. Coach Dye kind of sparked a lot of the offseason chatter about Auburn moving to the East, and then like, what does that do to the Georgia game? What does it do to the Iron Bowl? And you had one group of Auburn fans that were like, hey, it puts Auburn in the best chance to succeed on the national level and to get into the SEC championship more years than not. Then you had the other one. It's like, well, don't run from it. Right now they are better than you. Go rise up to that level. Don't run away from it. So I get both arguments.
And I think the interesting thing is if Auburn is in a position where they've only got one loss heading into those two games and they can split more years than not, especially if they beat Alabama, if one of those losses isn't in conference play, like what happened a few years ago, and Auburn finds itself in the SEC championship game against Georgia that they ultimately lost in a rematch game, with 2 losses in this college football playoff, the way SEC teams are getting in and getting the benefit of the doubt,
right?
That's a good argument for meet this head on, because if you got a non-conference loss, I think you can have 2 losses if you can win those games. I mean, that gets tricky, though, because it's such a brutal schedule. You look at the season this year in Baton Rouge, in College Station, in Gainesville, and then you got the 2 home games against, like you've already said, 2 of the best 3 programs in college football, or at least I would argue 2 of the 3 most stable programs.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. It's easy for me to sit here not being a coach and say, well, just win those games. Just have a loss going into Amen Corner.
Well, and I agree with you in theory, but the whole like splitting one of those games, that hasn't happened yet. They've either won both of them or lost both of them. So it just seems like the way Malzahn builds these teams is it either clicks or it doesn't, right? So
13 and 17, yeah. And then every other season.
Right, which is kind of part of the frustration, I think, from Auburn fans is, okay, why can't you do this more? Why can't you be competitive, instead of, just totally flopping, right? And you've seen a few of those years kind of mixed in there.
The 8 and 5 seasons, the 7 and 6 seasons, or you're competing for a national title.
Right, there's really no in between. And then there's the debate among Auburn fans, and this happens every now and then. It's like, which would you rather be? Would you rather be Georgia, or would you rather, be in a national championship, every few years?
That is an interesting point. I think that if you're Auburn, like you got to take being in 2 national titles in the last 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is.
Because personally, I would rather do that. I would rather be in a championship game twice out of every, 15 years or so. And I know that's not really the average, it's getting close to that. But you know what I mean? Opposed to just being so close so often. Like, I would have no interest in being Georgia. I would have none of it. I mean, can you imagine how frustrating that would be? I mean, I'm just kind of thinking across, my other sports fandoms, and it's like, it's well known I'm a Pats fan, so it's a little different, but it's like, I just can't imagine like the Super Bowl 2 years ago against the Eagles and just losing every time, or getting to the AFC Championship game. The years that we've made it to the AFC Championship game and lost, it's just like, but never winning the Super Bowl. Now it's a little different because they have several of those sprinkled in there, but I just can't imagine being a fan base and it's like, all right, this is it. There's no way we can get choked this close to the end.
It's been since the early 80s where they've reached that mountaintop and they've been close. They've won some conference championships along the way. They've had some great seasons, and they've been a more consistent program. The other side of the argument for Auburn is that Georgia has owned that rivalry in the last 2 decades.
Right.
And so while Auburn has had more success at the top of the mountain, or at least by winning one national title and getting to another, which Georgia did do, and of course lost in heartbreaking fashion, I mean, Georgia has just outright owned Auburn since the early 2000s.
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate there. But the thing is, Auburn's been to 2 national championships and won one of them, and Georgia has not won a national championship. Now, they had a big lead at the half with, the most recent one they've been to, but I don't think any Georgia fan's happy with how that turned out. I mean, it was kind of the origin story of Tua Tagovailoa, and and then the SEC championship from last year. It's incredible games between the two of them, but you can't win.
What was the amount of time that Alabama led in both? It's like 1 minute and 19 seconds or something.
It's one of the craziest stats I've seen.
In the 120 minutes of gameplay, I think they led for slightly more than a minute.
Yeah.
Because they led for no time in the first one.
Yeah. So give us your thoughts on that. Whether you're I'll put this podcast on YouTube. We get a lot of comments on YouTube. So, yeah, either comment there, tweet at us. I'm at Z Blackerby on Twitter. Painter's at Paint Sharpless. Comment on the Facebook post that we typically share out on, just search Auburn Podcast on Facebook. But let us know what you think. Kind of what camp would you rather be in?
A team that every few years gets to the mountaintop, and before 2010, Auburn couldn't say that. That
conversation's totally different.
Right. The last 10 years have changed that for Auburn. And then, of course, the argument remains that Georgia has been more consistent.
Well, when I was in middle school and the first part of high school, because Auburn won the national championship in 2010, it was both of our senior years. And I would play with my friends like, what would you do for a national championship? And then that happened, and it's like, oh, it kind of changes that game a little bit, But yeah, seriously, let us know. Let us know. I'm curious.
Also, another question. Did you expect Auburn in 2010 to win one and then actually get back in the next decade? Because it was a shorter turnaround, and no one expected the 2012 season to be so bad, and then certainly no one expected 2013 to be so great for Auburn. But I did not envision, after 50 years of Auburn not winning a national title
since
1957, then going back in less than 5.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating. No, I did not expect that because I thought it was all dependent on Cam. And I think you could say it was all dependent on Cam and then all dependent on Nick, because I think Nick was a special player, and I still think it's weird the chunk of Auburn fans that look back on him negatively. It's fascinating to me.
On Nick Fairley?
Nick Marshall, as far as 2013.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that offensive line in 2010 doesn't get enough love either. Just like
you're right.
The offensive line that will be blocking for whoever, Joey Gatewood or probably Bo Nix, one of the two guys.
Well, yeah,
senior heavy.
Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with, and I think this will be a little bit different with this class, but the 2010 offensive line, they didn't really have any NFL career. I think Lee Ziemba
he was with the Colts for a time.
I think he got picked up by the Panthers originally on an undrafted deal. I don't know where he spent the bulk of his career because I believe I remember correctly, like obviously they drafted Cam, and then I think they picked up Darvin Adams and Zimba. I think they had all 3 of them. They may have drafted Zach Clayton that year as well.
You're right. Yeah, the Panthers drafted Zimba in the 7th round of the 2011 draft, and then he spent another season with the Colts before exiting the NFL. But he had an excellent college career. First team All-SEC in 2010, an All-American in 2010, and an SEC championship as well as a national championship.
Yeah, and it's just kind of amazing. Obviously Auburn had the first pick, and then that was kind of it. Zach Clayton got drafted in the 7th round by the Titans. Okay.
And I could be remembering this incorrectly, but I think that Auburn defense that year, led by Fairley and was it Josh Bynes, the senior linebacker?
Zach Etheridge was a big part of that. Mm-hmm. But they were just incredible in the second half. Yeah,
and they were great, if I remember correctly, in the red zone. Like, they gave up a lot of yards.
Yeah,
in those games that season, but I think that they were decent at holding people out of the end zone.
Right, and they'd give up 3 touchdowns in the first half and like they'd shut them out in the second.
I think the best example of that was the Alabama game with Cam, and of course, so much of that game is thrown onto his back because it was an incredible second half. But they managed to only give up 3 points in the second half.
Right, and then the game plan against Oregon. I mean, the whole story of going into that national championships. Yeah. First to 50 wins, and it's 22-19.
It's kind of a bad game until the end.
Yeah, then there are all these rumors that like Cam played with a broken rib and all that. It's like, okay, I wonder what would happen if he was healthy, if that even is true.
Right, I remember him limping. Once when Byram hit the field goal, he was limping around and obviously happy, but he was in pain. That was an interesting game because there was the early 2-point conversion that Oregon had, and then that ended up helping them because they converted to tie it, and of course the Michael Dye. So like the fourth quarter in that game was exciting. I think we all were expecting offensive fireworks.
Right.
I don't know how we got on this topic.
I don't know. I'm cool with it.
I'm
cool with it. Yeah, but going back to the article about Commissioner Sankey. I just think it's weird how the SEC's handled all of this scheduling stuff.
Is it a secret? Like, because you mentioned...
I guess it is,
He said... You mentioned... I don't know if you said this on air, but when we were just talking about it, he almost said it like he was a disappointed dad. Like, didn't he say, I'm disappointed?
Yeah, I think there's somewhere in the article the quote that says something along the lines of, like, I'm disappointed that this information got leaked to the media or something like that.
Sankey would not confirm the scheduling change when the SEC announces the 2020 football schedule later this spring. He said the leak of potential scheduling news in the media is, quote, disappointing.
Yeah, there you go. It's like your dad getting on to you when you're younger. It's like, I'm not really mad at you. It's just I'm kind of disappointed. It's like, no, don't do that. Don't be disappointed in me.
What is the advantage? I'd be curious, to know what it is.
Here's my theory. Every offseason, NFL schedule release day is a big deal across NFL fans everywhere. And I wonder if the SEC wants to have like a minor version of that, and they control all of the information.
Excitement.
Off-season buzz is good. I mean, that's what's made the NFL and the NBA so popular is, all right, the off-season for basketball is more exciting than the season to me.
And then you think about the NFL draft, which is coming up, and how excited people are. And for teams that are not good, like the Cleveland Browns generally, not actually this year, but generally, like that's their Super Bowl because it's like maybe this will be the year that we get the guy who turns it around.
All 32 teams have hope in the NFL draft, every single one of them.
And then, you talk about the basketball free agency. That has become an absolute spectacle.
It is incredible. It's like, what is Kevin Durant going to do? LeBron last year, I mean...
Kyrie Irving as well. Yeah. There's other players, you're right. It's always...
Who's going to trade for Anthony Davis? I mean, there are so many stories, and it's fun. It's totally fun. So, college football, with the exception of signing day... And really, with the way they've done the early signing period, signing day is not that great anymore.
Happens at the end of the season.
Right. So there's really nothing like that. So I don't blame him if that's he hadn't said that that's why, but that's a guess.
That's a good guess. Also, Georgia really, I think at least the fans, and I imagine it wouldn't hurt Kirby Smart's feelings, although he was transparent about the fact that he was still at Alabama when Auburn and Georgia played, and Auburn got the benefit of 2 straight home games and back-to-back seasons. And so I think it's pretty evident from Georgia's standpoint what they want is that favor to be repaid, but it doesn't seem like that's possible.
I think it's worth it. I think Auburn should bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, I do too. I think that
it's going to make like you really have every other year is the only chance for you to win a national championship, I believe, in the current situation that you're in. And I think if you switch it up, just bite the bullet, play in Athens 2 years in a row, and you get what you want. You get what you want.
And on top of that, I think it just kind of quiets the Georgia crowd from complaining about something that would be an irritant.
Yeah.
But also it doesn't help that year, one of those years was the prayer in Jordan. So it's like a little salt in the wound. I think that also makes it a little worse for Georgia fans. But if Auburn was in their shoes, they would want that repaid as well.
I think so. I totally think so. So, I think it'd be worth it. I totally think it'd be worth it for it to kind of even out. But I also understand the argument. It sounds like everything's going to kind of be restructured in 2024 anyway when all the teams have played each other. That's my assumption of what that means. And so maybe the shakeup happens again. We'll see. We'll totally see. But, yeah. So going back to Commissioner Sankey, though, his first local interview ever, you know who it was with?
Zach Blackerby?
It was with ESPN 106.7. I can't claim it. It was technically Bill Cameron.
That's cool.
But I was the intern at the time who got him on. First local interview.
I didn't know that.
Dude.
Was it right as he became commish?
Oh, yeah. I was at Media Days. And I went to his handler, and I'm like, I'm trying to get a job with these people. can I have him, please? And she's like, yeah, sure.
I appreciate her. I don't know if sympathy is the right word, but willingness to. First off, she might have said yes no matter what, but I don't think that hurt.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she seemed very nice. She's like, I got you. And I'm like, cool. And I actually didn't realize it was his first one, but he sat down and he's like, this is my first local interview. I've done stuff with ESPN and, national stuff, but this is my first local interview. And we're like, how about that? Way to go, Zach.
Yes.
I work here now, so that's cool.
I think it all panned out.
Shout out to Sankey, for sure. For sure. Him and his great ability to keep secrets. Maybe
to be fair, I don't think that's totally on him, but
maybe
he's
that
trying.
was supposed to be a secret, too, and he just like, oops, accidentally said it. I want to do we'll probably do more draft stuff tomorrow and Friday, but sometime next week, I want to do a show where we kind of do an SEC power ranking show, and we compare our rankings 1 through 14, and we kind of see how different they are. I bet we'll agree on a lot of stuff, but I would like to do that sometime soon.
That sounds like a plan. It will also, I think we'll definitely, I would imagine, agree on a lot of the teams at the top and like the top 4, especially when you look at Alabama and Georgia. Mm-hmm. I imagine that we'll probably have Alabama at 1 and Georgia at 2. But what do you do with those, like that 9 through 14 slot?
Yeah, we may agree on some of the worst teams, but I mean,
yeah, Vanderbilt's probably going to be the worst team.
But yeah, I mean, like 7 through 12, there's not a lot of drop off there. So yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And talking about like Texas A&M, LSU. Does Ed Orgeron take a step forward? He exceeded expectations. Jimbo Fisher get it done in year 2. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a fun conversation. That's a good idea.
Real quick, just to kind of circle back to, you talked about it. If Auburn could split and, between Georgia and Alabama with just one loss going into it, they have a chance to make the playoff, just kind of the way the committee is shown to favor SEC teams. I believe it was ESPN Stats and Info. I could be wrong, but it was an ESPN account. I'm pretty confident. They tweeted out like the top 10 most likely, according to their like FBI or whatever, top 10 percentages of top 10 scenarios based on percentage. And the 7th most likely playoff scenario was Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and Clemson. Can you imagine how mad people would be if that happened? According to them, there's a 3% chance of that happening.
So I wonder what the scenario is then. I'm assuming is that an LSU Georgia SEC championship with Alabama getting the 4th spot basically because they dropped a game to LSU and other than that ran the table?
Yeah, so if LSU in theory is 12-0, Alabama's 11-1.
Because they're getting the benefit of the doubt at this point. Like if they've got a one loss and there's a couple of questionable teams floating around the 4th spot almost every year, I think Alabama gets the nod.
And then if Georgia was 12-0 and LSU beat Georgia in the SEC championship, that's the only way I could see that happening.
And then Clemson just knifes through a terrible ACC.
Yeah, then Clemson does what they do and they've forgotten how to lose, seemingly. So
Trevor Lawrence, would be interesting to see if he's the first guy taken. Is that going to be the conversation again? Because
I think he'd be the first guy drafted this year.
His stock was sky high after he tore up Alabama in the national title game.
His stock will be the highest since Andrew Luck. It's going to be incredible.
And it won't what also won't surprise me, Zach, is when he has a killer sophomore year, and then like Jadeveon Clowney, his junior year, like there will be all of this talk about whether or not Trevor Lawrence is and maybe not, because playing quarterback's different than playing some other positions that are so much more physical. But I wonder if we'll run into those same issues of like him kind of keeping his eyes on the NFL and trying to protect himself.
And his body's going to fill out. He's a tall, lanky guy. You look at it, it's like, how's he throwing with that much force? But he's I'm curious to see how that's going to affect his game. It's probably going to make him better, once he gets some size on him and thickens up a little bit. But all right, cool. We were a little all over the place today, but the NFL draft is tomorrow, so we'll do some draft-related stuff tomorrow, and we'll have some fun with that. So, Painter, I will see you then. You can follow Painter on Twitter, once again, at PaintSharpless. I am on Twitter at ZBlackerby. This has been another edition of the Auburn Podcast.